Why was Lev Yashin truly recognized as the best? Who decided that? How did a legend fall from grace? And why did one of the most famous men of his time live in a modest Moscow apartment? Lev Ivanovich Yashin was a Soviet footballer. He played for Dynamo Moscow and the USSR national team. He was an Olympic champion, a European champion, a 5-time USSR League winner, and multiple-time Soviet Cup champion. FIFA and France Football named him the greatest goalkeeper of the 20th century. He was voted best goalkeeper in the Soviet Union 11 times, and to this day, he's the only goalkeeper in history to win the Ballon d'Or. And now, here's one more reason to talk about him again. Yashin stood in goal for the World Cup against England in what was called the match of the century. For the first time ever, the game was broadcast live around the world. Around 100,000 fans were in the stadium, with millions more watching on television. Despite the talent in the World Cup, they were disorganized, struggling to keep up with England, fueled by a roaring home crowd. The British controlled the game and launched wave after wave of attacks, but they couldn't get past Yashin. After the final whistle, the crowd stood and applauded the 34-year-old Soviet goalkeeper. Even the English commentator couldn't hold back his praise. This is how Europe saved the career of the Black Panther at a time when his own country had turned against him. Lev Ivanovich was born into hardship. During the war, in October 1941, his father's factory was evacuated near Ulyanovsk. On his 12th birthday, Yashin was unloading train cars filled with spare parts. Just a year later, he was working on machines, pulling double or even triple shifts under wartime rules. The factory foreman forced workers to smoke so they wouldn't fall asleep and get pulled into the machinery. That dangerous habit would stay with Yashin for life. At 16, he received his first award, a medal for valiant labor in the Great Patriotic War. And after work, he still found time to play for the factory football team. Today, Yashin appears in video games. Films are made about him. 60 years later, his name still echoes around the world. Back then, he was a true icon. But in interview after interview, report after report, a different picture emerges. He was a simple man, kind, gentle, flawed, like any of us. Off the pitch, Yashin wasn't invincible. His wife, Valentina Timofeyevna, once said, "He took things to heart. He was afraid they wouldn't pick him. He doubted himself. He always asked, 'Do I deserve this?' He wasn't the type to ignore what others thought. He feared people would say he'd grown arrogant. At 18, he suffered emotional burnout. He left home. He stopped going to work. He'd vanished from a factory considered strategic during the Cold War. And worse, he was now labeled unemployed, which was illegal. One way out? The army. Yashin joined the internal troops in Moscow, and there, football found him again. He played for a local Dynamo-affiliated team. Soon, he got an invite to try out for Dynamo's youth team. But nothing was easy. He had to submit a backdated resignation to leave the factory job. And that day, Yashin's life became forever tied to Moscow Dynamo. Now, for anyone who believes Yashin never made mistakes, I have bad news. He did. There's rare footage showing it. He was human, not a superhero. But the real miracle was this. Even after conceding a goal, he never fell apart. He pulled himself together. That's what made him Lev Yashin. Some say Lev Yashin saved around 150 penalties during his career. But let's be honest, that number's a huge exaggeration. If that were true, you'd have to ask, what on earth were the Dynamo defenders doing to give away so many? According to Transfermarkt, which tracks official and friendly stats, the real numbers are far more believable. 37 penalties faced, 11 saved. Even Yashin himself didn't claim to be a penalty expert. When asked how to save one, he'd say, "I just jumped for the ball, and sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't. Could have been a goal." In his debut for Dynamo's youth team, he even conceded a goal directly from the other goalkeeper's clearance. And his first appearance for the senior squad, a disaster. He came on as a sub with 10 minutes left, made a mistake, and the team lost the lead. In the very next match, Dynamo were up 4-1, until they conceded 3 goals in a row. Yashin was taken off in the 78th minute. In the locker room, a club official said his performance was a circus act and ordered him to be removed from the squad. They even called in a general. "Get that kid out of here," he said. "He's no good." Yashin later remembered, "I just sat there, breathing shallowly. I would have curled up in a corner. He didn't play for the first team again for 3 years, but he didn't give up. In summer, he trained on grass. In winter, he played hockey, and in 1953, he won the USSR Hockey Cup and took bronze at the national level as a goalkeeper. He was even considered for the national hockey team. Eventually, he gave football one more shot. Part of it reflects the state of Soviet sports, but it also speaks volumes about his talent. On May 2nd, 1953, Yashin returned. And that same year, he was already ranked the second-best goalkeeper in the Soviet Union. The following year, he became number 1. 3 years later, France Football ranked him 5th best footballer in Europe. From 1956 onward, his name appeared on every Ballon d'Or shortlist. Europe was watching. Yashin became the USSR's starting goalkeeper in 1954. By 1956, he had won Olympic gold in Melbourne. 4 years later, the Soviet Union were crowned the first ever European champions. Some now argue that only amateur teams played at the Olympics, or that many countries, like England, Germany, and Italy, skipped the Euros. But at the time, the Soviet team were national heroes. Between those major wins came a tournament that truly put him on the world stage. The USSR knocked out England and Austria, thanks in large part to Yashin's brilliance in goal. Back then, international games were rare. This was one of the few chances to see global stars in action. Some claim he won the Ballon d'Or for just one great match, but the truth is clear. He was respected worldwide. The Western press gave him his legendary nicknames: the Black Panther, the Black Spider. Dino Zoff, who also played until age 40, once said, "He's the greatest of all goalkeepers." Both he and I agree. Lev is number 1. He's unique and unrepeatable. At the 1962 World Cup, Soviet fans expected only gold. But when the team lost in the quarterfinals, someone had to take the fall. And since the Soviet training system could never be blamed, Yashin became the scapegoat. He remembered, "Most of our journalists focused on my lack of confidence. Those easy goals that went in, they blamed me." By 1966, he was 32. Whispers began. Maybe it was time for a younger goalkeeper, but no one dared cut a national icon. That World Cup was held far away. There were no TV broadcasts back home, not even radio coverage. All news was delivered by a single Soviet journalist. After the USSR lost 2-1 to Chile, the official word was, "The Soviet team is out. Yashin is to blame." The legendary goalkeeper of the Soviet Union was given one word: attack. Immediately, newspapers painted Yashin as a villain. Local media and fans turned on him. "You're a pensioner. What are you doing here? Go look after your grandchildren." The magic was gone, and it felt like it was gone for good. Yashin grew bitter. People smashed car windows. There were threats, racketeers, furious fans. His wife received terrifying phone calls. In the end, they had to leave Moscow and hide for 2 months. "Let the past go," they told him. "You let in those goals. You're to blame." But then, his coach at Dynamo, Gleb, stepped in. He convinced Yashin to come back. They started from zero, back with the reserve team. Then, slowly, one away game at a time, Yashin rebuilt, far from the angry crowds. In 1963, he didn't just reclaim his name, he made history. Together with his defenders, Yashin set a Soviet record. In 27 league matches, they conceded just 6 goals. Yet even with that, the national team didn't want him. He started to believe it was over. Then came the turning point. In the fall of that year, Yashin was invited to play at Wembley for the World 18th in the match of the century. But back home, crucial Euro qualifiers against Italy were coming up. The Soviet head coach said, "Let him go to Wembley. We'll manage without him." For most of his career, the world hadn't seen Yashin play. Soviet matches weren't televised internationally. But now, on the biggest stage, he finally had the chance to show everyone what he could do. And he did. Even his rivals supported his Ballon d'Or win. The Western press called his performance unforgettable. The Soviet national team had no choice but to bring him back. This time, the public wouldn't accept anything less. An hour before the rematch against Italy, it was announced Yashin would start in goal. He delivered. Thanks to the #1 goalkeeper, the USSR preserved the score and qualified for the European Championship. The match was in Rome. Yashin left such an impression that stories about him echoed for years. In the Ballon d'Or vote, 11 out of 21 journalists from Europe's top sports outlets gave first place to Yashin. The Ballon d'Or went to the Soviet Union. The Black Spider was a hero once again. By today's rules, the award might have gone to Pelé, but back then only Europeans were eligible. And with no World Cup or Euros that year, voters looked at club performances. Dynamo were brilliant, and Yashin, reliable as ever. He was a towering figure in sport. That's why he was often invited to play in international friendlies. Once he even led the Turkish national team onto the field for a farewell match honoring a local legend. And throughout, he remained world-class. Yashin had become a brand. But beyond the trophies and nicknames, Yashin changed the position. 60 years ago, goalkeepers stayed on the line. They kicked the ball away. They rarely spoke to their defense. Yashin changed that. He moved confidently across the box. He anticipated attacks. He threw the ball by hand, accurately, to launch counterattacks, and he talked constantly to his defenders. At first, people called it a circus, but today's keepers, they play just like he did, exactly like he did, 70 years ago. Think of how Neuer plays today, his sweeping runs, his commanding presence. Now imagine that kind of play in the 1950s. Yes, Yashin made mistakes, but his style was unforgettable, and it worked. Live television changed everything. What people once only heard on the radio, they now saw with their own eyes. Lev Yashin's style became legendary in his own lifetime. It's still taught today. No wonder they call him the father of all goalkeepers. You might surpass him, but he will always be your father. Since then, only 2 goalkeepers have come close to the Ballon d'Or, Buffon and Neuer, but even they didn't win it. The truth is, Yashin had it harder. It's a controversial topic, but there's no denying his popularity. People didn't just say Dynamo, they called it Yashin's team. Despite the fame, he remained deeply humble. He carried the team's bag of balls himself. He never said no to anyone, something officials often took advantage of, and he never asked for more. Even when he was named the best footballer, the Black Spider earned half as much as younger players, simply because he never thought to ask. Dynamo players were constantly invited on tour, but if Yashin wasn't in the lineup, the appearance fee was cut in half. Fans across the world came just to see him, yet the money went to the Soviet Sports Committee. All he kept was the people's love. After the final match of the 1960 European Championship, he had a chance to change everything. The president of Real Madrid pulled out a checkbook and told Yashin to write down any amount. If he would transfer to Madrid, the deal was his. But Yashin didn't take the offer. He stayed. Until 1971, he wore only one jersey, Dynamo Moscow. He got offers from Brazil and beyond, but he stayed loyal for 20 years. That's why the people loved him. He was one of them, humble and honest to the core. For his farewell match, 2 million applications were submitted, but Luzhniki Stadium could only hold 100,000. Every seat was filled. Stars from all over the world came to honor him. In 1971, it wasn't just a player who retired. An era came to an end. At 41, Yashin had given everything to football. He played through ulcers, knee injuries, and concussions. Because of smoking, his blood vessels suffered, but still, he went out on the field again and again. In 1982, Yashin was invited to the World Cup. A German tobacco company even offered to pay for the trip, but Soviet officials denied it, claiming he couldn't go due to a smoking ban. He took it hard. You can't imagine his face when he heard the news. He just rubbed his face in silence. He did eventually make it to the World Cup, but during that trip, he had a heart attack. Then later, a stroke. After the age of 50, vascular disease led to gangrene in his right leg. In 1984, the leg was amputated. A sponsor gifted him a left-hand drive car with hand controls. Despite all he gave to football, Yashin was neglected in his final years. Germans gifted him a custom car for his 60th, while his own country honored him only days before his death. At the ceremony, he quietly asked, Why do I need this award now? The Soviet Union's goalkeeper, respected around the world. He didn't just receive the Ballon d'Or, he earned it. He's included in every all-time dream team, a true example for professionals and for future generations. That was Yashin. Until his final day, he never called himself a star. He simply said, "I'm just Lev."